Our hymn of reflection is number 310. 310, I Would Draw Near to Jesus. I would draw near to Jesus, in his sweet presence abide, constantly trying to serve him, safely secure at his side. I would draw near to Jesus, I would draw near to him, fully surrender each moment. I would draw near to him. I would draw near to Jesus, nothing withholding from him, knowing he loves to be gracious. I would draw near to him. I would draw near to Jesus. I would draw near to him, fully surrender each moment. I would draw near to him. I would draw near to Jesus, seeking his strength to be true, willing to tell of his goodness, gladly his blessed will to do. I would draw near to Jesus, I would draw near to him, fully surrendered each moment. I would draw near to him.
Continue to be amazed at the music that we have here. I want to just say that so often we don't think about all the people who come in here, they practice, they volunteer to do things. And I was talking with Alice earlier, because I remember one week that I was here on a Friday, she was in here playing, and I thought, wow, that's just beautiful. So I really enjoyed her playing, and to me, I think God blesses us with skills and talents, and I'm so glad that the people who are blessed with those skills and talents look to enhance them and share them. So I just want to say thank you to Alice, and thank you to Perry. I mean, this is just awesome, and also the AV people who really do a lot to help us, and the greeters. I mean, people here at Minnetonka are terrific, and I'm so thankful, because when anybody new comes in, or when we just get together, there's people that greet us. We'd love to come here. I look forward to coming here, and I got like a 4.5-hour drive, and I love to come here. So thank you. This is the day that we come together to worship God. I don't know if we have any visitors here today. Do we have any visitors? Okay. I was amazed. I was at the pastor's staff meeting this week, and he shared that first service last week, I think we had an all-time record maybe for a while. Over 60 people were here for first service. That's amazing. I mean, really, especially with the weather, the cold, it is fantastic. And I just love to see and love to have people here. So this is going to be the final, or the finale, of our looking at the book of Ruth. And we said, we've talked all along about the book of Ruth is not just a love story, but it's a story about relationships, about grace, about love, and about redemption. If you recall, I'm just going to do a quick flyover. Elimelech and Naomi changed their circumstances by moving from their homeland to Moab. Fact is, Naomi became a widow, and the two sons also passed away, and so there were 3 widows living together in the land of Moab. And then we find out that Naomi says, I'm going to go back to my people. And she tells the 2 young ladies, you stay here with your people. And one of them made the decision to go back with her. And it was a good thing, because Ruth, when she went back with her, she was in the field working and pulling in and getting all of the scraps that were there. And Boaz told his workers, leave a little extra for her. Ruth showed interest in Boaz, and Boaz kind of showed interest in her by saying, leave a little extra for her. Ruth, as we saw last week, at the urging of Naomi, decided to go ahead and just let Boaz know that she was interested in him more than just being a gleaner out in the field. And she said, this is what you should be doing according to customs. And Boaz responded by reciprocating the feelings that Ruth had. Now we're going to take it to the final thing, and really I could just say, and they lived happily ever after. But there are a few things that I think we can draw out of Ruth 4. Let's bow our heads. Dear Jesus, thank you again for bringing us here together. Heavenly Father, please speak through me. May we hear what you want us and need us to hear today. In your name I ask, amen. How many of you are in sales? Whoa, wow. Okay, really? You've never sold anything in your entire life? I sold Sue on marrying me, okay? So that automatically qualifies. I did a great salesperson job. I hope she doesn't have buyer's remorse. But I believe that all of us at some point in time, we sell. We sell our ideas. We sell, and it's not necessarily for money, but what we try to do is influence people around us. We introduce them to new ideas and new things. And being a Christian, our job is to bring Jesus to others, and Jesus will close the deal when we do that. It's not our job to sell him, it's our job to reflect him and have people think, I need to have what you have. But as you know, I do some sales training and leadership training. And so one of the things that I like to do is basically just starting out, when you sell, you really want to find out what everyone's expectations are. You want to uncover the needs that somebody has, and you want to understand the wants, so that way, okay, I cover your needs, but if you want this, I can definitely help you with that. We also want to understand what you do not want, right? Don't want, must-haves. I shared this with a few people right before or right after Christmas. Derek wanted to get a new car, new used car. So I said, okay, well, let's go to the dealerships and we'll take a look. And he liked this Altima. It was black. It had a sunroof. His must-haves were he really wanted a sunroof, okay? He had to have it in his price range because he's making the car payments. His absolutely I will not settle for anything was I can't have a white car. I am anti-white car. Well, after things fell through at the Altima dealership because of some shady things that they were doing, we went to a Toyota dealership. And the guy gives us the keys, lets us go drive a lot of different ones, Camry hybrid, Corolla hybrid, Corolla. And they all just had a little something not right with Derek, okay? Not that he's high maintenance. But the guy says, I have what I think is a perfect car for you. It's got a sunroof, very low mileage, it's beautiful, and it's white. So Derek took a look at the car, and he says, it's perfect. I'm like, where did this come from? We told the dealer up front, no white cars. And Derek's like, yeah, but it's got a little black along the bottom. It's kind of outlined. You see, in that instant, he was prepared to say, you know what? What I said I don't want, I'm gonna take. Now, I'm going to accept. Now, you're wondering, what does that have to do with Boaz and Ruth? I'm getting to that. Heard a story about a young lady who was engaged to a guy, and the lady, her parents said, we need him to join the Catholic Church because they were Catholic. And so her fiancé went to all of the classes to become a Catholic. And one day the daughter comes in and she's crying and she says, Mom, he broke it off with me. And her mom's like, why? Well, he's just coming to Christ through Catholic here. And she says, yeah, we oversold him. He's a priest. So there's that balance, right? Boaz, after meeting with Ruth that evening, said, I'm going to take care of this kinsman redeemer piece for you tomorrow. He was shifting into salesperson of the year mode because Boaz knew that there was a closer relative that by rights could assert their rights and have Ruth in addition to the land. And Boaz really liked Ruth. So when two people like each other, you want to do everything to be with each other, and yet there's this wild card out there that maybe that wouldn't happen. But Boaz was a straight-up, strong character person. After all, he started to look out for Ruth in the first day on the job. He made it easier to get more grain. He invited Ruth to eat with him. The more time they spent with each other, they discovered that they were really kind of two peas in a pod. Virtuous, strong character, moral character. So we're going to skip to this day that Boaz now has. Now, in those days, the business of the community was done usually at the front gate. The front gate was somewhere between a council chamber and a courtroom. So you had the gatherings of the learned people, the well-to-do, those that people trusted to judge them and kind of make decisions if there were any disputes. It was really a place to go to hold meetings. So Boaz goes out there, and he's sitting at the gate, and he sees this kinsman that's coming that's a closer kinsman, a closer relative, the closer relative coming up there. And Boaz says, if we look in Ruth 4, it starts out by saying, Boaz went to the gate, and behold, the close relative whom Boaz had spoken came by. So Boaz says, come on in, friend. Come aside. Sit down here. So he came and he sat down by him. And then Boaz took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, sit down here. So they did. Now, it's interesting to note that whoever wrote the book of Ruth didn't mention that Boaz called this person by their name. We don't know the name of the next closest kinsman. Google doesn't know the name. It's interesting. Why we don't know the name, I started wondering why we don't know the name. And really, in those days, right, so the book of Ruth wasn't being written while Ruth was there. It was being written in hindsight because of the things that happened. And so the writer of Ruth says, basically doesn't name it because the name of the person wasn't relevant. It wasn't important because ultimately that person abdicated his responsibility, and so that was not important. Can you imagine abdicating your responsibility to carry on the name of your relative by marrying a widow of childbearing years, and your name is not even written in the Bible because you did not do that? People who could not preserve his brother's name would lose the name and would be buried in a nameless tomb. So, here we go. Boaz says to the relative, look, this is your area of responsibility. And here's Boaz's sales pitch. He says, Elimelech went to Moab, his property had been sold, and now Naomi is back, and so the property is there, and so you can be the first to redeem it, and you can have all this land, all this property. He didn't mention Ruth. He kind of left her out, just for a very brief moment, because he wanted to be able to close the deal so he would have Ruth. So, it's interesting that when you mention Naomi, right? Okay, that's fine. You mention the property, that's fine. In those days, the property was given out to the tribes and then to different clanspeople. God never intended for the property to be sold, and so every 50 years, if it had been sold, it would be redeemed and it would come back to the original owners. Again, though, they had the responsibility, the Redeemer kinsman had the responsibility to take care of that land and all of the belongings. So, Boaz starts out with the property. That's all, the property. And the Redeemer, the kinsman that was closest, jumped all over it. He's like, sold, I'll take it, that's great. But here's the caveat. Then Boaz says, by the way, I just want you to know that it's not only Naomi, but it's a package deal. It's a 2-for-1. Ruth is also going to be there. Now, the kinsman was married, and he already had kids, and so he started thinking, let me see, the inheritance is right here, and then, oh man, any offspring with Ruth would take away from my children's, my loves, my kids' inheritance. That would not be good. That wouldn't go over well with the wife, with the kids. Yeah, that wouldn't be good. So he says, you know what? What I just told you, not happening. You can have her. You can have her. It's a great way to kind of sell, because it's like, it's your decision, but remember, you get this over here. It's a white car. Oh, don't want it. Boaz, I can't imagine it. If Ruth and Naomi were there and they heard the kinsman say, I'll take the property, Naomi, great, their hearts must have sank. But Boaz pulled the ace out of his pocket and brought up the fact that it's not only Naomi, but it's Ruth. And then their hearts leapt for joy because he says, no, I don't want that. And Ruth's probably saying, cha-ching, I am going to marry the guy I love, I love, I love. That's when Boaz said, I will redeem you. Now, let's go back to this and take a look. So, when these transactions were happening, people had to witness it. Not only that, but this was a transfer of property and posterity for the family. Remember, Elimelech's kids had died, and so his lineage was going to be completely wiped out. I'm the only boy in the Cross family, and I was like, that's why I had to beg Sue to make sure that we could have a kid, just to carry on the lineage. It's important. You know, it's not anything that's being pride, but it's, you know what? I want kids. I like kids. We should have kids. And yes, you want your lineage to continue. And back in those days, it was very important for that to happen. And so that's why God set up this whole system of when you're widowed, if you're still if you're still able to have children, then here are the people. Here are the people who are supposed to line up so that you can have succession. And yet, the closest relative said, I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I ruin my own inheritance. You redeem my right of redemption for yourself, for I cannot redeem it. He wanted the property, but he didn't want the responsibility. Sometimes I think about, as I was going through this message for today, it kind of hit me that, am I like this person who decided against the inheritance, against what he should do? Am I the first kinsman redeemer? Because I realize that in some ways, I may not do things right. I may make decisions that aren't the best or that aren't what should be made. And that's the one thing that I don't know if you struggle with, but I do. And sometimes I lose the bigger picture. I lose that vision of what really God has in store for me. And it's frustrating because I know that's happening, and yet I'm just like, God, I can't see what you see. And then I ask him to try and help me to see that. But rather, there are times when I just focus on the short term, and I give up what could be so much more because God would bless me. Boaz confirmed with the 10 men, because as soon as the kinsman said, no, I don't want it, and Boaz said, yes, and by the way, you 10 over here, you were witnesses, am I right? You were witnesses. You can nod your head. Yeah, you were witnesses. Thank you. I got somebody to nod. Okay, good. You were witnesses. It was going to be really awkward if you didn't nod, just saying. You were witnesses. Now, in those days, to actually close the deal, the one who was giving up their right had to give their sandal to the other person. This is like scorekeeping. I mean, it's like a trophy. I wonder if you walked into their house, if you would see in Boaz's house all the sandals that he has, right? He was a righteous man, and he was able to do things. He was very successful. And so he got this sandal, and that was the closing of the deal. But that's not the only thing. Everybody there, not just the 10, but everybody at the gate was praising this whole thing, because now they said, your lineage is going to be continued. And may you be as great as Tamar and Leah, Rachel and Leah. May those two, may you be as prosperous as that. And if you recall, Rachel and Leah, between the two, they had 13 kids, and they were the mothers of the whole nation of Israel. So, everybody's clapping, everybody's enjoying this wonderful ceremony, and then we come down to Boaz and Ruth getting married. They don't just live happily ever after. God gave them a son, Obed, who was the grandfather of David, King David. The lineage was kept intact all the way down to get to where Christ was going to be born. When we look at Naomi, in the early chapters of Ruth. She's happy. They go to a new land. All of a sudden, she loses her husbands and sons, and she's so sad. In fact, when she's out of options and she says, I'm going back to my country, to my people, she says, just call me Mara, because I am not good. She goes from sadness to despair. But then her despair all of a sudden turns hopeful when she returns to the land that belongs to her people. Hope was there. And as she's watched Boaz and Ruth get together, that's kind of more hope. For those who have had kids that are older and they grow up and they get engaged and you see this, it's kind of that hopeful for the most part. Sometimes you don't want them to marry that person, but for the most part, it's like you're hopeful. Yes, they're going to find love. They have love, because that's what we all need. And then, taking that full circle, Naomi went from hopeful to a higher, fuller, more complete happiness than ever before. Because it says in the Bible, it says, Then the woman said to Naomi, "Blessed be the Lord who has not left you this day without a close relative, and may his name become famous in Israel. And may he be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age, for your daughter-in-law who loves you, who is better to you than 7 sons, has borne him." That's a big statement. A daughter-in-law who is better than 7 sons. A huge statement. That an in-law from another country with different beliefs is now better and has done better for her than 7 sons. Then it says Naomi took the child and laid him over her bosom and became a nurse to him. I don't know what it's like to be a grandparent, but I'm sure that you out there that are grandparents know. That little baby's face, the eyes, and you realize, your parents love you very, very much. And I'm here and I love you. And grandparents have that special right of taking their grandkids and spoiling them, getting them all hopped up on sugar and sending them back to their parents. I can't imagine that, but one day I may find out about that. Naomi, in looking back at her life, in reflecting on it, realized that everything did come full circle. When I look back and take some lessons from the book of Ruth, there are some things that I would like to share that I learned, and hopefully what this series has helped you as well in terms of when we think about and reflect on Ruth as more than just a story between Ruth and Boaz. The lessons I learned is to take action, to change the circumstances. Elimelech and Naomi took action. Second lesson is servant leadership, putting others first. Naomi set a perfect example for Ruth and for her family, putting others first. Naomi converted Ruth, if you will, to go back with her to her people. Even though she said, "Stay here," Ruth disobeyed and says, "Where you go, I will go. Your people shall be my people, your God shall be my God." That is powerful, to have an influence over somebody who doesn't believe like you, who's an in-law, who would then leave their place of comfort and go with you to a different land. The third thing is going back to reunite with your people. And this is reuniting with the church family. Going to a church and getting yourself recharged every single week. For me, it's extremely important because the weeks can be bad, the weeks can be good, but in the end, I need to have my batteries recharged by coming here. The fourth thing is be willing to put in the time to work in God's field. If you remember, Ruth put in a lot of time and effort trying to get the scraps that were left behind. And in return, Boaz, similar to God, Boaz protected her. He provided for her, and he supplied her with her food needs. God does that for us who are in the field. We are here. We are supposed to be working this field, which is anywhere that we happen to be. You're here today to listen and to build and to get to be with people who are like believers and who can all encourage us. And God is protecting, He is providing, and He is supplying our needs and even some of our wants. The fifth thing is be humble and submit to God. That's a big challenge sometimes for me, is to say, God, I'm just going to follow your lead today, because there are days that I'm like, I really want to do this, that, or the other thing. And when I'm going through in the morning and I catch myself saying I got to do all these things, I catch myself and I say, you know what, let me just take a minute and step back and listen to what God has for me today. The sixth thing is commitment. Commitment to life with Christ. Ruth went in, showed that she was interested, and then she committed to do whatever he wanted her to do. We need to commit to Christ because that way he can redeem us. It's nice to know that he wants us. It's nice to know that we have this gift of salvation. But as you've heard me say before, gifts aren't gifts until we receive it. And once we receive it, we need to commit to it. Commit to Christ. Commit our lives, because then Christ can help us in whatever we're going to do. The seventh thing that I learned is don't be afraid of what the future holds. So often I worry about and I have anxiety attacks about what's going to happen. What's going to happen if this doesn't work out? What's going to happen if that doesn't, right? I can't do that. With the kids, I worry about what they're going to do. I worry about how, I can't do anything about that. Do not be afraid of what the future holds, because we know who holds the future. I know who holds my future if I'm willing to invite him in and to let Christ lead. As you've heard me say, the book of Ruth is more than just a story about Ruth and Boaz. It's about us developing a relationship with Christ and the steps that we take. Jesus is our Redeemer, but like Ruth, we need to ask him to cover us up with his garment, with his wings. Come in, cover us up. He redeemed us through his blood shed on Calvary just about 2,000 years ago. He's watching over us in the field. He's leaving us signs that he wants us to have a more full, more robust life with him. At some point, we need to commit to either be all in or not in. You see, committing to Christ is somewhat like being pregnant. You either are or you aren't. There's no in between. We know that because in Revelation it talks about the church of Laodicea, which was lukewarm. We want either hot or cold, but let's make that decision. There is no show up to go up. There is room for you and me in God's family. God wants us to perpetuate his name to his glory, about his only begotten Son that he sent here for us, for me. Even if it was just one person, he sent him here for me. Being all in means that we have the obligation as a family member to continue the family name by spreading Christ's love for everyone to our families, our friends, community, and everyone we meet. They're all fair game. We don't have to do a hard sell. We just have to reflect God's love. As we leave here today and we go to the next part of the service, I ask that we all keep in mind that we're workers in his field, that he loves us, and he wants to give us more than we could ever imagine in our lifetime, both here and in heaven. Thank you.